I'm Amos, host of Undaunted, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready, because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
You are listening to the Starling Tribune, a podcast dedicated to the Arrow TV show.
This guy gets more airtime than the Kardashians, right?
This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, situations, and stories are the properties of Time Warner. I am the Oracle, and this is your Tribune.
Welcome back to Earth 2's favorite newspaper, the Starling Tribune. This evening I'm filling in for our chief editor, SP, but don't worry, it's still a pretty packed show. Your other reporter for this episode 196 of the Starling Tribune is Michelle.
Smile. It's your lucky day, baby.
And I'm Chris, saying no deal. This evening we'll be discussing Arrow, as well as news, interviews, articles, and announcements that have dropped in the last week that could and very well will impact future episodes of Arrow, as well as The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, Vixen, Constantine, The Ray. I'm sure I'm missing something else, and the rest of the DC universe at large.
If you're new to the show, thank you for searching us out on the internet and joining us. After the show, you can check out our content at GonnaGeek.com, where you can also find other geeky videos, podcasts, and articles.
Well, thanks, Michelle. Why don't you go ahead and break down the current episode for us?
Sure. This week's episode is called Docket number 11/19/4173. It's season 6, episode 21. It aired Thursday, May 3rd, 2018. Directed by Andy Armaganian. Is an editor for 17 episodes of Supergirl, 32 episodes of Arrow, 44 episodes of Smallville. So this is an editor turned director. Has directed 1 episode of Arrow and 1 Supergirl. So we have 3 people responsible for the story itself. We have 2 people that did the teleplay. The first is Uba Muhammad, written 2 episodes of Legends and teleplay for this episode of Arrow. The other person who did the teleplay for this episode is Tyron Carter, who has also written 2 episodes of Legends. And the story was by the big man himself, Mark Guggenheim.
Well, the big man for 2 more episodes at least.
Yeah, I follow him on Twitter, and he's like, yeah, I just locked my last episode of Arrow, and I forgot to take a picture in the editing bay, and
Oh, no.
this is my last thing of here, and it's like, oh, dude.
So looking at the writer credits for Uba Muhammad and Tyron Carter, it looks like they both have 1 Arrow and 2 Legends. They've probably been teamed together before, is my guess, without digging deep into the IMDb records. Seeing how everything lines up so nicely. Maybe it's thinking.
Maybe.
But thank you for breaking down the episode for us. Since SP isn't here, SP likes to talk the numbers, the ratings numbers for this week in the DC universe. I will try and do him justice for what happened. We'll start off with Monday, the 30th of April. We had the latest episode of Supergirl, Season 3, Episode 16, entitled Of Two Minds, pulled in a live rating of 1.50. The next day, on May 1st, the latest episode of The Flash, which is Season 4, Episode 20, entitled Therefore She Is, pulled in a 1.70. And then on Thursday, Arrow with Season 6, Episode 21, which we'll be discussing, docket number 11/19/4173, pulled in a 1.10. At least we've hit a full 1. I'm looking at the bright side of life.
The Flash numbers, though, it usually is a 2. I wonder what's going on.
I would have to go back and see what else was going on Tuesday night, but I don't think Deadliest Catch is really what's enticing people away from Flash and things like that. I don't know, maybe there's a lot of folks, I've said before, or at least in private on our stuff, that I'm so far behind on Flash that I'm pretty much dropping it until it gets, until they put it all on Netflix. So maybe there's other people that are starting to take that route that say, hey, we're near the end of the season. We know Flash and all these shows are on Netflix a week after the end. I'm just going to get caught up then. Wishful thinking, perhaps? I don't know.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of live stuff right now. Like there's like a Bachelor and a Voice and American Idol, and a lot of people like to watch those things live. And when you got stuff that you can save for the DVR, that's what you do.
That's a true fact. And we also talked about before, some of it could be accountable to the app helps them out. I mean, we'll never know what the numbers are on the app, but we can assume the numbers must be good enough. And that's why, and I don't mean this pessimistically, Arrow's ratings have been down, but it got renewed. So evidently they're still getting the eyes somewhere that they're missing in live viewing and DVR +7s and +3s.
Yep.
Who knows? But I think that is going to wrap up our ratings talk for this week. Let's dig into the episode. Michelle, why don't you kick us off? What is the overall theme? What can we tie this episode title into? What does it mean?
Well, this episode, Oliver finally goes to trial. And that is his case number. It's docket number 11-19-41-73. And thanks to a comicbook.com article, we actually learned that this title is a deep pull. The character Green Arrow first appeared in More Fun Comics 73, published in November 1941. So docket number 11-19-41-73 refers to Green Arrow's first ever appearance.
Okay,
I thought that was a great pull. Like, somebody did some research there. That's amazing.
Oh, most definitely. When I heard the episode title, I can pull up my notes, and on there I wrote it and said, this must mean something, but what? They've snuck so many references into things in the past. It's like, there has to be a meaning. I just hadn't dug in enough to figure it out yet. So I'm glad that comicbook.com was able to find that, and you found it in there so that I sort of know what's going on a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, Arrow's usually known for big fight scenes. And we actually start this episode with an action scene. Chris, what happens when Diggle visits Casnia?
John Diggle is channeling his inner John Rambo, basically. He is a one-man army. He's parachuting down from the sky, shooting soldiers on the way down, and not missing. He's taking out lots of soldiers as he parachutes down. Once he hits the ground, he's basically one-man arming it, firing grenades at cars and jeeps, shooting soldiers down dead, working his way towards a tent, presumably to find someone or something. We don't know quite yet at this point. He gets to the tent, he drops his rifle, and a guy comes out the tent, and he attacks him with a knife. And it was a really cool scene. Tosses him on the ground, runs in, and there's a guy in the dark, and he goes, I need your help. And we go, ooh, what could this be? And we move on from there. But seriously, one-man army. This is more dominant than what you've seen Slade do at times and what you've seen Oliver do at times. Here's your friendly reminder that John Diggle, before he was Oliver Queen's bodyguard, before he was Spartan, was a highly trained member of the U.S. military and is still a highly trained member of Argus. Dude is a powerhouse.
I have to admit, when I watched that, I was thinking, I think someone on the staff plays Just Cause.
Yes.
Because I just couldn't help stop thinking that. And it was great. And I love seeing Diggle be that one-man army because he is amazing. And it's one of the reasons why I complain when he's not on screen enough.
No, I totally get that. It was cool for those people that have been clamoring to see more of Diggle doing something and getting to be involved in things. This was his moment to shine, and he hasn't had a lot of solo moments to shine this season. So it was pretty cool. Like I said, the friendly reminder that Diggle's a powerhouse on his own. Maybe a little too powerful.
Yeah. The rest of the episode is the trial. And what gets me first is that this trial takes place in a day. I do not understand what it is about trials in the Arrowverse. We had another trial on the episode in Flash, and that trial was one day. I don't mind it being one episode, but like everything in one day.
Well, it certainly moves the plot along if it's only one day. You don't have to worry about changing up set dressings, changing up costumes, anything like that. I agree with you, though. What should be such a complicated legal case would arguably take weeks. But remember, Diaz is pulling things behind the scenes rather. Maybe he's got something that is, I want this done in one day. Get it taken care of so that the city's not sitting here lingering, so that I can put Oliver Queen in his place. I can shut all of this down and I can continue my plans. That's about the only thing plot-wise I can think of as to why they might condense this trial down to one day.
True. One person who's not in the pocket of Diaz is the prosecutor, Alexa Von Owen, who's played by Catherine Dent. You've seen her in a lot of things. She's also in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right now, playing Hale. And it was funny because I watch both shows, and there she is. I'm like going, wait a minute. Aren't you supposed to be torturing Talbot over on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right about now?
Well, they gave us a nice Easter egg with her, too, when they talked about her previous prosecution past, and they brought up Intergang. And for those that aren't familiar, Intergang plays a pretty big role in a lot of Superman comics from time to time. They're one of the primary gangs in Metropolis. So, nice greater DC Universe Easter egg there, at least.
And as you mentioned with your quote, Oliver is refusing a deal. He wants an acquittal and such. One of his main tactics is basically what I call the Parade of Perjurers.
That's accurate, isn't it?
The first perjurer I was actually surprised by, and that was Dr. Eliza Schwartz, because she actually did see, who Green Arrow is. She knows the truth. I was surprised she lied. What about you, Chris?
I was surprised, but I also felt like they're trying to follow a little bit of the Batman vibe there with like Dr. Leslie Tompkins, who's the doctor who treats the Bat family. That is, look, these people are doing good. I'm going to do my part to keep their identities safe so they can keep doing what needs to be done. And I imagine as a doctor, Dr. Schwartz has gotten to see the ugly underbelly of Starling / Star City throughout time. And maybe she sees how Team Arrow is helping the city to clean up, to grow, and things like that, and wants to protect them for that reason.
That's a very good point.
That's the only reason I could think of to perjure yourself, because there's really nothing in it for her to not flip on Oliver. I mean, unless there's something going on behind the scenes where they kind of said, hey, don't flip on us, we need you, or we're going to give a charitable donation to the hospital. I don't know. I like to think it's for heroic reasons, but who knows?
I'm going to go with heroic reasons as well. I like that idea. Well, Diggle comes in at the last moment. He almost had a bench warrant because he was late due to his little adventures in Kaznia. And of course he, like, I was his bodyguard, I would know. And it was interesting with Dinah, because Renee was like, look, we got to practice and all this type of stuff. We can't plead the fifth. And even Curtis is like, I've watched so many Law and Orders, you can't plead the fifth. And Dinah ends up pleading the fifth because of what happened in Hub City with that drug dealer. And that was something that they brought that back.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice way to bring in something that's happened in the past of this show that can be used to discredit someone who should arguably be fairly creditable in this trial, by making her take the Fifth Amendment. Yes, the Fifth Amendment means that you're not incriminating yourself, but it's hard to, especially from all the legal shows I've watched, for a jury to not consider that an indirect admission of, well, I did something. I don't want to say so that I don't get in trouble. So they effectively neutralized Dinah by having her plead the Fifth. And she didn't have the option. She had the option to, rather, because she doesn't have a deal like Renee. I like how they brought that up later. How they're like, Renee, you have a deal. You can't plead the Fifth because then they'll charge you for other things.
Exactly. I thought it was interesting how the prosecutor handled Felicity. Like when she brought up, well, when did Oliver get arrested? And then she rattled out the date. And then she was like, well, when did you get married?
Yeah.
And it's like
7 days later.
And for those of you who don't know, sometimes, fiction plays weird with, what facts. It is actually true. Spousal, there is legal precedent where if you are married, you don't have to actually testify against your spouse. Spousal privilege. And that's true. And then Felicity is like, no, blah, 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 blah. Do you think she lied well?
She lied okay. I mean, she's never been the best at lying throughout earlier times. She has tells and she gets nervous. She didn't get near as nervous as we've seen in the past. So maybe that's the evolution of the character, is that she's able to lie a bit more freely now to help her husband. Or maybe it's just that the stakes were so high she was able to put that aside. She did all right, but she got discredited when they brought up her father. I mean, at that point, she was effectively neutralized.
Yeah, how do you think Van Owen did? This is somebody who has a 99% conviction rate, not in Diaz's pocket. How do you rate her as a prosecutor? Do you think she was making a good case?
I think she was making a good case because everyone that was there to potentially support Oliver Queen and be able to refute the fact that he's the Green Arrow, she neutralized with some kind of information. Now, the question on some of that is, how does she get that information? I mean, I don't know how widely known it is that the calculator is Felicity's father. Now, presumably, the previous prosecutors have already put together these case files and things like that, which are populated with information that Diaz gathered. And also, I'm having a complete brain fart, who the big bad was for the first half of the season.
Caden James.
Caden James also captured, who was a super hacker. So potentially a lot of this information was already in these case files, and she just had to structure some of the arguments, is what I was starting to think. But she did a good job. I mean, like I said, neutralized almost everyone.
Yes, and at first when we think, oh no, there's no way that they can really prove that Oliver, this is going south. Oliver's the Green Arrow. Everybody's going to know it. We need something to happen. And then a big thing happens. What's that big thing, Chris?
Tommy Merlin appears in the costume of the Green Arrow, jumps through the ceiling, which there's evidently really nice skylights in the courtroom for all that glass to come down around him, and magically lands in there and then has a well-scripted unmasking. I mean, he doesn't even have any eye makeup on like they normally do.
I know. And then he takes the stand and he says, I'm the Green Arrow. I didn't want... Roy Harper took the bullet for me before, and I felt bad about that, and I didn't want that to happen to Oliver. That's why I'm here. My favorite part of his testimony is when he said, I am the only person to have ever worn this hood.
Yes.
Which is true. He's the person who's actually ever worn that particular outfit.
It's true from a certain point of view.
Exactly.
I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi right now. I also enjoyed when he got on the stand, he goes, my name's Thomas Merlin, but you can call me Tommy. And then literally all he was from that point on, even in the closing arguments, was Tommy Merlin.
Exactly. And of course he claimed, I faked my death because of what my dad did. And I was able to just be the Green Arrow from then on, righting my dad's wrongs and so forth. And he gets arrested because of the vigilante law, and the judge does have to seem professional. And it's like, it's proper for me to actually want this person arrested. And he's like, well, I'm going to get freed. I have a team and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it'd be like 5 minutes.
Yeah, which is true. Diggle and Renee free him, and they're in the back of the van.
With all their masks off.
Yes. And then what did we learn about Tommy Merlin?
Tommy Merlin, he is in fact Christopher Chance, who we met early on, the human target, whose job is basically to assume the identities of others. So he assumed the role of Tommy Merlin. And you've got to think, from the actor's perspective, that has to be really fun to go back to a role you used to do, but with a twist on it where you're someone else playing that role. That kind of had to be fun.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I forgot about Chance.
I did too.
Because he was in one episode last season. And he was barely even in that.
That's true. He does have some great Mission Impossible style masks, though.
Oh my God. That is exactly what I thought. It was like when he took that off, I'm like going, Ethan Hunt.
It's Tom Cruise.
Yeah. And so that was fun, because I really thought, I'm like thinking it was Earth X Tommy, because we don't really know. He's supposed to be still in the pipeline, right?
He's dead, I thought. He gassed.
Oh,
had
that's
the
right. He
broken tooth.
gassed himself. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
he's dead. Now,
Yeah.
when the reveal of Tommy came in there too, credit to Stephen Amell, the look on his face when he's like, the ghost of my friend is back, he nailed how Oliver Queen would react to that. Because remember, he didn't know that it was going to be Tommy's face under the hood either. We find out later on in the episode. So it was well done, and kudos to you, Stephen Amell. Near perfect acting right there on that, because I totally bought Oliver Queen's shock. He knew someone was going to come down, but the shock of it being Tommy Merlin, that's the best way, story-wise, that you could say that Oliver Queen would be shocked by who is under the hood.
Yeah, that was... I know he tried to tell Felicity, he tried to do like, you don't have to take that chance to testify. And she's like, oh, it was a pun. I don't do puns. The one person who wanted to lie, who technically actually couldn't because he has a deal, and that's Renee. He actually got up on the stand and he was ready to lie.
Yeah, this was character rehabilitation for Renee. I know a lot of people have been tired of him and the way he was on the outs with things and seemingly didn't care about his previous actions or the perception of him being kind of dickish without really a good reason. He's ready to fall on the sword here to clear his conscience, which was, I will lie if I have to, and I'll go to jail to get Oliver out. And I don't know from everyone else's standpoint, but from my point of view, at least a little bit, it started to redeem a character that I loved in season 5 that I've come to kind of hate in season 6. I saw some seeds where I was like, well, maybe they can bring him back some.
Yeah, and then he's ready, and then there's that expression, and the camera turns, and there's Diaz with Zoe.
Oh, God, that's... And you knew right there, and you don't blame him, that right there you can't... You have to follow the plan. You can't lie to get Oliver out because that's your kid right there. The most powerful man in Star City, who is dangerous, that metas are afraid of, has just walked in there with your terrified kid and sat them down right in front of you.
And Oliver whispers, Renee, and gives him the nod. Because he knows there's no other way that things could happen.
What choice do you have? You don't want to sacrifice a kid's life for your own. I mean, no, that's just not how you do it.
So there's a meeting between Oliver and Jean Lauren, his lawyer. And what she says about not asking her clients whether or not they're guilty, that is something that a lot of defense attorneys do. That way, they're like, just let me do my job. I don't need to know. Just tell me what I want to know, and that's that. But she asked, and he actually does tell her the truth. What did you think of her reaction?
I mean, it was mostly, you have confirmed what I've already thought for a long time. I mean, you kind of saw that, okay, this is what I expected. Now that I know that this is the case, we can proceed from here. So I thought it was well done in that regard, but let's be honest, Oliver Queen's secret identity is not the best well-kept secret in television.
I thought it was interesting that she proposed that he have his I am Iron Man moment.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put a target on my family. And he finally admits that he wants the mission to be over and that he wants a life after the mission is over.
Right, but I don't know how that mission ever really ends with the state that Star City's in. It's a great thought to have that eventually I want to be able to move on to do something like this, but I just don't see it happening. And he sort of had the chance to walk away already, and it's kind of at odds with what he'd said when he took back the mantle of the Hood, which is, this is part of what defines him, is trying to save the city, trying to wear this. I get the thought of, I will eventually want to walk away, but he's not someone that would be able to do it. We've already seen it.
And it seems as though this episode closes the book on Oliver actually having the I am Iron Man moment.
Potentially. I think there's some possibilities for how it could go, and we can there's a news story coming up that I think has the potential to shape how things go in this world. I could see it still happening at the end of the season, or Diaz just publicly outs him because he's tired of the fact that things haven't gone his way and wants to take him out.
Do you want Oliver to have an I am Iron Man moment?
I think it would be interesting. It gets them away from having to have the joke that is the secret identity at times, because we're going to get to it later. Eventually, once this trial ends, the first thing they do is go to the damn Arrow Cave. Come on, you really don't think the police or private investigator are going to be telling you anything right after you get out of jail for being the Green Arrow? It would be interesting. I think it would make for a very interesting dynamic, make for something to be very different in season 7. And they have been teasing us that there's going to be consequences. It's going to put a different twist onto the character. And I think this is the twist right here. If you've got a publicly outed superhero who's still trying to go and do everything, it would certainly be fresh and new.
That's very true. And for listeners who do not understand the I am Iron Man moment reference, I apologize. At the end of the first Iron Man, Tony Stark has the opportunity to do a cover story to deny he's Iron Man. Instead, he basically throws away the cards and says, I am Iron Man. So that's what we mean.
Yep. Which put them in an interesting standpoint of, if you think about it in the MCU, there's not many people with secret identities, which is probably narratively freeing.
Does anyone have a secret identity in the MCU?
Spider-Man.
Yeah, because he's a teenager. That makes sense.
And if you start going to the shows, Daredevil.
Yes. Wow, that's not a lot.
That's about it right there.
And well, the trial ends and the jury has time to deliberate, which is apparently 3 minutes. It's like a commercial break.
The prosecutor just painted that good of a story, I guess. She's, remember, 99% conviction rate.
Yeah, so whether or not it was the prosecutor or the fact that perhaps Diaz owns the jury as well.
I hadn't even considered that. That's a good point.
Oliver is found guilty on all counts, even though there was a person who came in that says they were the Green Arrow, even though Laurel actually testified and said that the Green Arrow was Tommy Merlin. Even after all of that, which there's something called reasonable doubt. If there is a shred of possibility that this person could not have done it, it's called reasonable doubt, and you're not supposed to have a guilty verdict. You only have guilty when there's no doubt at all. And having somebody say that they're the Green Arrow, that's reasonable doubt, even though the prosecutor's like, hey, Oliver's got all this money and resources and he just made this happen, which is kind of technically true. Then he's like, well, oh my goodness, Oliver's guilty. He's going to go to prison. Then Loring calls for a judgment notwithstanding the verdict. This is a true thing. I looked it up because I'm like, did the writers make this up or if it's true? According to dictionarylaw.com, judgment notwithstanding the verdict is a reversal of a jury's verdict by the trial judge when the judge believes there was no factual basis for the verdict or it was contrary to law. The judge will then enter a different verdict as a matter of law. And this is what the judge does.
What did you think? Judge.
Yeah, what did you think when the dirty judge did that, Chris?
It was kind of surprising because remember, this is a judge who is pretty clear he's in Diaz's pocket. He was shutting down all of Loring's objections with questionable means for shutting them down. And I think at one point that even said the judge was in his pocket. And then all of a sudden, he doesn't seem angry. He makes a calm decision that goes in Oliver's favor. And that's when I kind of scratched my head and went, wait a second. Diggle and Renee said they had a plan. Are they blackmailing this judge? I doubt they have blackmail that would outweigh what Diaz has. Is Christopher Chance still in town, I wonder? Maybe this is him up there? I was like, something smells fishy here for this judge to do an abrupt 180.
And you were right. It was Chance.
And it was a smart move to continue that. I mean, the problem there is they're basically, presumably, going to sacrifice somebody's life to free Oliver.
Which is what happens because Diaz isn't happy. And even though the judge is like, they knocked me out, it wasn't me. Diaz just straight up kills him anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he's a dirty judge, but the question is he dirty because it's money? Is he dirty because of blackmail? I know if it was blackmail, I'd probably feel a little more bad if he got shot and killed by Diaz versus if he was taking money on the take. But still, I mean, you traded potentially a somewhat innocent person's life for Oliver Queen's. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think I'm okay with it, but at the same time, there's part of me that's going, it doesn't feel right. This isn't very heroic.
Well, we learned it was Renee's idea. And then we get the moment of Renee and Oliver. Is this enough for you to basically, I have in my notes, oh, Renee has one good idea and now everything's okay. Is that enough for you? Are we to just believe that they've kissed and made up?
I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't know that it's enough. I think they can begin burying the hatchet and try and move on. But I don't know that you can get past the fact that in the back of Oliver's head is going to be, this man's betrayed me multiple times. Yes, he came through in the end, but I don't know. And if you're Renee, I don't know what your motivations are this season other than your daughter. It doesn't make everything better, and I imagine most fans don't feel that it makes everything better, but I think it's a step to try and rehabilitate the two Team Arrows or something like that.
Yeah, I think the writers were trying to create it to be this big moment that Renee was willing to go to jail for him and then came up with this idea. I think they wanted it to be bigger than what we think it is. Because again, we're just like, not only did he betray him, but the whole, I thought it was funny when you said bury the hatchet when Renee
unintentional pun.
Oliver with the axe. So yeah, it's, and shot Felicity. Renee shot Felicity.
Right. And remember, we talked about in the news a few episodes back how Mark Guggenheim and Wendy Merrick were kind of surprised as to how much the fans turned on New Team Arrow. So they've had time since they've come to that realization of, oh, wow, the fans don't really like New Team Arrow. They don't really see the justified reasons for them leaving and opposing them and everything. Maybe this is their attempt to begin the rehabilitation of them. It's more so Renee than anyone else, but you get a little bit with Dinah, who was going to testify until she had to take the fifth, and Curtis just kind of starting to calm things with Felicity over the past couple episodes. Maybe their play here is to try and make us like everyone again. But I don't think they've accounted for the fact that people were really hacked off by New Team Arrow.
Another person it seems the writers want us to like is Laurel, Black Siren. Because we had a lot of Quentin and Laurel. Now, Chris, you are our Laurel expert.
Oh, yes, that's my subtitle on everything.
What did you think of this evolving relationship between Quentin and Laurel?
I'm glad they've gotten from the awkward father-daughter thing, because at one point here, I mean, he even says in this, if you were anything like my Laurel, he's finally come to the realization of this is not his Laurel back again. This is another Laurel that while she looks the same and has a few similarities, they're not the same person. I don't think he's seeing her as a replacement Laurel like it creepily seemed earlier on in the season. I think he's seeing her as someone who needs help. So I start to buy a little bit better the relationship they have here now, because it's not predicated on a creepy father-daughter kind of thing as much, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I like how he brought up the dog analogy with her, because he just went, oh, Diaz is tugging on your leash, because that is the type of analogy Laurel used on Diaz a couple episodes back when it was the dragon, and she was telling him, oh, fetch, heal, things like that. And she finally defies Diaz. First, during that little interview thing, she doesn't come out and say that it was Oliver. She just says she'll testify. And then when she testifies, she went, it's Tommy. And then finally, she does what we've always been wanting her to do, and that's go attack Diaz.
Yeah, we've been wanting that. It didn't really work out so great for her, did it?
No, he has a thingy.
That's the technical term, guys.
It's probably a sonic disruptor,
Sonic
suppressor.
disruption nullification device, patent pending by Stinson. I don't know.
And then, of course, he, has her. And do you think he's going to kill her or use her?
He's going to use her to get to Quentin because he's seen how conflicted she is around Quentin, specifically last episode when they were at the Chinese restaurant, and pretty much he could tell by looking back and forth between them. He's kind of called her on it a few times, so she's leveraged to get the mayor in place for what he needs. She's a tool that he can use to get to Quentin to then get to Green Arrow.
Okay. And I thought it was interesting. Here's this man who's been working 5 years on this plan, and that's Diaz. And it was very elaborate. And we have 2 episodes left of the season. This plan A that he's so carefully crafted falls apart. And Chris, what's his plan B?
He's going to kill them all. He's going to kill Oliver. He's going to kill everything Oliver loves, and he's going to make him suffer. It's like Slade from season 2.
Or Prometheus from last season.
Yes.
I actually had that in my notes. It was like, oh, Slade is going to, no, Prometheus is going, oh no, Diaz is going to kill everybody. Now, we'll wait to the news story. I think we should wait to the news story about the killing and the stuff. Do you have any less thoughts about this episode before we move on?
Yes, they pretty much set it up so that Roy can come back next season. As part of the testimony in there, they start talking about the fact Roy Harper wasn't a vigilante when Oliver was on the stand, to that effect. He said, Roy is not a vigilante. I know who the Green Arrow is, but it's not Roy, and I'm not going to tell you who it is. They basically did everything they needed to do so that when Roy Harper comes back, because we know Colton Haynes is coming back next season, he doesn't have to have an alias. He doesn't have to be in hiding. He can be Roy Harper, potentially, in Star City, because they've cleared his name.
Yeah, that's right. So I wonder, well, that's interesting. So I wonder if they knew he was coming back before this was written, because this was a long time ago.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they were writing a backdoor way to bring him back again in the future with the hopes of, or it could have been that they were talking to Colton Haynes and pretty much were working on a deal when they were in the writer's room on this one. And it was, well, if he comes back, we've got this set up. If not, it's kind of a throwaway line because it was just part of Oliver's testimony. It wasn't really brought up again at any point in there other than Tommy saying, oh, it wasn't Roy. I didn't want him to take the fall like Roy. So I think it's a nice setup to be able to bring him back. And we'll see if he comes back as Roy Harper. I hope he does.
Me too. And I still want his first words being, Thea sent me.
Yes. Not Thea's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would suck.
Well, Diaz's plan B will start next week in the episode The Ties That Bind. It's season 6, episode 22. It will air Thursday, May 10th, 2018. Diaz targets Team Arrow and their loved ones. Oliver struggles with Felicity putting herself in danger when she gets the chance to stop Diaz for good.
Well, that's going to be a fun one. Then we were talking about this in the pre-show, and I think we touched on it at the very top of the show. We got 2 episodes left. I don't know what they're going to do in these 2 episodes. There's a lot of stuff that's been juggled in midair throughout the progress of this season. So there's going to be a lot of stuff happening fast, I bet, in the next 2 episodes. Plus, we all know Katie Lotz comes back in the finale.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I think we might have some theories on that come out of our news. Live from the Starling Tribune main news desk on floor 52 of Starling Tribune Tower, it's the weekly news roundup with our chief news anchor, one Michelle Ely. Michelle, why don't you kick us off with some news on someone leaving the show? Oh no!
I know. Arrow star Paul Blackthorne will exit this season, and Paul Blackthorne plays Quentin Lance. So along with him and Willa Holland, that's 2 big exits this season. And what's interesting is that this leaves only Stephen Amell and David Ramsey as the lone original series regulars remaining from the pilot. Emily Bett Rickards, who plays Felicity, recurred on season 1 before being promoted to season regular in season 2, and she was not in a pilot. That is interesting.
It really is. This is starting to feel like Smallville. This is about the same time with Smallville when they got the season 6, season 7, where the only original cast members left were Tom Welling as Clark Kent and Allison Mack as Chloe Sullivan. And everyone else had been rotated out. They'd brought in fresh blood. They had brought in other people from the comics like Lois Lane. It's following the DC TV formula they've had for past shows, I guess, but man, what a surprise, and it sure can lead to some good conspiracy theories as to why he might be exiting.
For those of you who have listened to this podcast since episode 1, the various hosts of this podcast have theorized that Quentin will die.
Many times.
Many times. So every season they have been wrong. Here's the thing. Are we going to be right this time that he's going to die? And that's why Katie Lutz comes back because her dad dies? Or is he going to be able to ride out of town into the sunset?
I think he lost his chance to ride off into the sunset. I mean, what does Quentin have left right now? He's got being the mayor and helping with the Green Arrow's mission. It's not like previously when he had a relationship with Mama Smoke and they talked about going off on their own. His ex-wife doesn't really care for him as much anymore, I would wager. She's remarried, I think they even say at one point. One daughter's dead, one daughter's traveling through time. I don't know what going off into the sunset would be for Quentin, and I don't see him as a character that could be like, well, we saved the city, adios, I'm going to Las Vegas for the rest of my life, I'm retiring. I think that this is probably it. The chat room seems to agree that he's a goner, but we've said it so many times. I just got to stick with it, so hopefully I can be right at some point.
Thea had a drive off into the sunset ending.
That's true, but she had a mission and people surrounding her.
Yeah, so if he goes the other way and he dies, do you think he dies protecting Laurel? Or maybe a different member of Team Arrow?
It's going to have something to do with Laurel if he kicks the bucket, because they've been building this almost all season. Since after they get off the island and him trying to find Laurel. Like, oh, I shot my daughter, I killed her. They've been building towards Laurel and Quentin and something happening. And maybe this is the way they can finally push Black Siren to being good, is that Quentin dies to save her from Diaz, and now she's going to try and embrace the legacy of the Laurel from this earth, and also what Quentin was trying to do for her and doing good. Maybe this pushes her back to the light side. I don't think I buy it if they do that, but maybe.
Do you think anybody else will die at the end of this season?
Diaz, maybe? I don't know. I kind of like the theory that they all lose and Diaz is still in charge next season, but if they're going to end with the big bad story this year, I think they probably have to kill him. And Black Siren kills him if he dies.
Really? Not Oliver?
If Quentin dies, Black Siren kills Diaz.
You heard it here first.
I've been right 13% of the time, so I'm due.
Exactly. Now, Chris, you have a bit of news about a streaming service.
Yes, so we all know everyone loves to get in on these streaming services. It all started with like Netflix and Hulu. Now you've got Disney standing up their streaming service. ESPN standing up their own. Well, not to be left out, we do know that DC Comics will be launching their DC Universe streaming service. Their upcoming video service will officially be called DC Universe, like I said. During the announcement, they talked about a bunch of the shows that could be coming to that. That includes the live-action Titans that they're doing right now, a Harley Quinn animated series, the third season of Young Justice entitled Young Justice Outsiders, which BT dubs Young Justice is great. If you haven't watched it, please watch it. And now also a just-announced Swamp Thing live-action series from James Wan. So they're going to put a bunch of cool content on there. They have a back catalog, presumably, of like all of the cartoons that they've done, all of the past TV shows, like the 90s Flash, potentially, the Justice League cartoons, the Batman cartoons. They could put a lot of cool stuff on this service. The question is, what's the right price for you to want to get this service? And I don't think they know yet, because DC/Warner Brothers, they didn't even announce a price for this service yet to get the DC universe. So it'll be interesting to see what comes. I know I will probably pick it up long enough to at least binge watch Young Justice, because one of my favorite cartoons in recent memory has been Young Justice. But I'm starting to get streaming service fatigue. I can't afford, nor do I need, to have all of these services. So I pick one up for a couple months, turn it off, pick up another one, turn it off, and it's annoying.
Yeah, I just got a free month from CBS, because CBS has their own service as well, so I could binge watch the first season of Star Trek Discovery. And then I canceled it before I had to pay any money. It's gotten out of control. And
Yes.
It's just, not everybody needs their own service. And I did not even know about ESPN having their own service.
It's crazy. It's just the new cable, basically, is all these streaming channels. And I guess the freedom you have is, instead of having a Comcast bundle or a Time Warner bundle where you're locked into a contract for 3 years and here's what you get and then the price is steadily raised, here it is, you sign up and you pay month to month. So if you decide you don't want, say, Hulu next month, you cancel it and it's done. And then you can pick up HBO Now or something like that. So there's freedom in that, but it's certainly a lot more inconvenient to have to manage, say, 12 streaming subscriptions versus a cable subscription and a couple streaming ones on the side. So who knows? I think the bubble's eventually going to pop on these things. Of course, I've said that about other things and been proven wrong, so who knows anymore?
Well, it also depends on the reliability of the internet. I live in an area where the internet isn't that great. I mean, it's not bad. I'm doing a video podcast right now, but it could be a lot better. And there's a lot of parts of the United States that really don't have internet.
Right, and if you're going to be pulling down a 1080p video, I mean, what does they say on Amazon Video? That they say roughly an hour's worth of video is about 6.5 gigs of bandwidth that you're using up. So if you start factoring into the fact that everyone's probably going to want to get the higher quality stuff, so say about 720p, 1080p, you're talking 4 to 7 gigabytes per episode of whatever you're watching, depending on whether it's a half hour to an hour long. That's going to add up quick, and if you're on slower internet, that's also problematic because, well, I can watch my TV show, but God forbid I try and go on Twitter or Facebook, because then I just don't have enough bandwidth locally to be able to do it. So there are limitations, and presumably that's something people get around at some point in time, but streaming is not the solution for everyone. I can't believe I just said that. So I guess some people should keep Comcast, even though they're the devil. I said that out loud.
I know.
Oops.
It's okay. So that's what we have for news this week. And we are part of a larger podcasting network, aren't we, Chris?
That's right, Michelle. We are a part of the Gonna Geek Network. If you're watching the live video right now, you see the mic flag on my microphone right now. The Gonna Geek Podcasting Network. There's 25 plus different shows on the network. We're constantly adding new shows that cover a variety of things. You've seen us, the Starling Tribune. We're narrowly focused to just the TV show Arrow in the greater DC television universe. You've got things that are broader focused on, say, tabletop gaming, video gaming. We've got geeky shows, whatever your tastes may be. And just this week, we added a new show to the Gonna Geek Network. And this is the On the Bubble podcast. And this week, in episode 21 of On the Bubble, they're talking about Marvel's Most Wanted, specifically the fan campaign to get ABC to release the pilot. If you're not familiar, On the Bubble podcast likes to talk about shows that are on the bubble, on the verge of cancellation, what could be done to save them, what worked, what didn't. And in this case, it's a slightly different twist, talking about the Marvel's Most Wanted pilot that was supposed to feature Mockingbird and Lance Hunter. It's a very interesting show, and this show, the summary is, today we're taking a look at Marvel's Most Wanted pilot and the fan campaign to get ABC to release it to the fans. So if that's something that's interesting to you, go check it out over at gonnageek.com. On the Bubble is a great show. It's about 10 to 15 minutes each week, so it's something you can digest real quickly and have a lot of fun, and you might find a new television show that you want to take a chance on, and you taking a chance might help it actually get saved. Ooh. Fingers crossed, right?
Right.
But looking at our time now, it is about time for us to start wrapping things up. So a big thank you to those of you that did participate in our chat room over on geeks.live, but also a giant thank you to everyone who downloads the audio podcast for StarlingTribune.com or catches the replay of our video version over on the Gonna Geek YouTube channel at youtube.com/Gonna Geek. Some relatively new news that SP brought up last week. Don't forget, if you have an Amazon device, such as, I can't say them because mine will go off, but an Amazon Voice Services device, you can enable our podcast as a skill. Just tell it to enable the Starling Tribune. And don't forget, you can catch us live as we record at geeks.live, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, every Sunday.
We would love to hear from you. We are the Starling Tribune on Facebook and Instagram, at Starling Tribune on Twitter, and you can call us at 612-888-CAVE. That's 612-888-2283. Well, this brings us to the end of another good episode. Any last words before we sign off? At the Chris Farrell.
Hashtag hoss, 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 hoss.
And I am at Michelle Ely, signing off with hashtag Sonic Dampener Thingy Majig. Oracle, I think we're done here.
This was the Starling Tribune. You can leave us feedback at gonnageek.com or check out our archive at starlingtribune.com. Visit gonnageek.com for more podcasts. Music by Kevin MacLeod can be found at incompetech.com. This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, stories, and situations are the property of Time Warner. No infringement is intended. We will see you for the next episode of CW's Arrow.